according to the fund. So I just want to officially welcome everybody to the March 24th session. What you're seeing on the screen is on the papbs.org website where we house everything. And I'm going to stop sharing now. And I want to introduce Dr. Kelsey Morris, who is back for our session. And Lisa Powers has decided we were a fun group to hang out with, and she's going to join in on the fun today too. And at that, I am going to turn this over to you, Kelsey.
Okay, thank you, Tina, for that orientation to the work that we've done so far and that lovely introduction. I know Lisa and I are thrilled to be back with you all. You've had quite the impression on us. I texted or sent an email to Tina on Saturday and said, I need a recommendation for a cheesesteak. I mean, if I can't actually be in Pennsylvania to taste Pennsylvania, and I apologize if there's like an Eastern Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania food war. I don't want to start a turf war here by saying that I'm into a cheesesteak, but you guys have had quite the impression on us.
Well, I think it would be more of a football war, but not, okay. I mean, Philly, we know we got the food, right?
Well, and I see Christy.
And at that, I'm going to turn off my camera and mute.
And thanks, Christy, for saying today is National Cheesesteak Day. So we ordered some and ours will arrive tomorrow. So I look forward to reporting back when we all come back in April for our lovely work together. So as we've introduced ourselves in the past, just a friendly reminder, I'm Kelsey Morris. I am co-director of the MU Center for School-Wide PBS here at the University of Missouri, co-author on the District Systems Fidelity Inventory. And we have the opportunity to do this work with you all in Pennsylvania because our team here at Mizzou, which is what we refer to as the University of Missouri, our team here at Mizzou is one of the co-directing institutions for the National Center on PBIS. And I am so fortunate to be here today with my colleague, Lisa Powers. So I'm going to let her do just a brief introduction on herself.
Good afternoon. You're making me hungry, so that was a good start. Nice to see you all again. And yes, you were so much fun last time. I just had to come back. I'm also honored to learn with and from Kelsey as well. I am part of the MU Center. My background, if you don't remember from last time, is as a teacher in special education, as a behavior and PBS coach, and then an administrator in planning and development for a large school district that supported 21 school districts in St. Louis. In the last 5 years, I've been working with the MU Center team, always focused on how do we build systems to ensure each and every child belongs, sort of my personal mission. So that's me.
And Lisa is also a co-author on the District Systems Fidelity Inventory. And both of us have had the great opportunity over the past few years to actually be working with district teams to move that work of implementation forward. So we're excited to share our learning history with you all today. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we'll get rocking and rolling today. So today we're going to be talking about two different strands. If you were with us last time, we used part of our session together to kind of do a reflection on the journey up to that point. When we met together in February, we'd already done 3 strands. And so it was nice to kind of carve out time just to check in on those 3 strands and how the work was evolving with your district leadership team, or just kind of how you're thinking about the work on those strands. Today together, we're going to be doing section 5, which is all about workforce capacity, and section 6, which is all about training. So our goal today, if we take a look at our session intentions, we're going to take a look at starting with a check-in or a call-in. So in a minute, but not yet, we're going to share some conversation starters, some prompts that really pertain to your takeaway tasks with section 4, which was all about policy. We're curious to learn from you, to hear from you, and to definitely create the opportunity for you all to learn with and from each other about some of the things we talked about last time. You know, working to create policies within your district that not only support PBIS implementation, but also work to enhance PBIS implementation. Today, we're going to spotlight 2 new implementation drivers, like I mentioned earlier, workforce capacity and training. And then throughout our time together, we've tried to infuse new resources, new examples, new tools in your toolbox that you can take away and use between our sessions, or really just as you start to move this work forward. Because Tina, just a real quick reminder for all of us in the room today or on the call, the goal is that by the time we finish these sessions, when we've wrapped all 9 sections of the DSFI, the goal is that they have a team and they take the DSFI. Is that correct?
Correct. So after every section, you have gone through and said, here's what you need to do. And not every, as you know, not every section is going to be fully informed, right? But you're going to at least be aware of all of the sections. Then in June, the final DSFI will be completed, and the hope is with an action plan for moving forward. That is part of, for the 6 sites that are our target sites, that is a requirement of the stipend.
All right, thanks Tina for clarifying that. Because like she mentioned, and like we've said, our goal is to take you through these implementation drivers, which we use these implementation drivers to build that district systems fidelity inventory. And so with these implementation drivers, so far we have covered, let's take a look and see what ground we've covered. We've covered leadership teaming. We've covered stakeholder engagement, funding and alignment, policy. And today what we're going to do is start to wrap out that top row, which is all about those executive team functions, what your leadership team's doing to really set the stage for good, solid work. And then we'll also start to move today down into that bottom portion, which is about the implementation functions, kind of getting people set up for the day-to-day stuff. When we were together last time, we looked at section 4, which is about policy, and you had some takeaway tasks. You were encouraged to locate your district's policy, start to understand, if we're talking about implementing PBIS across all campuses, across all buildings, well, what do our codes of conduct say? Or what are the procedures for how somebody should be responding to behavior errors? Are those using instructional approaches, or are they using more punitive responses? Are they kind of consequence driven? Also looking to see within those policies, how are we sharing them out? How does everybody know, both within the district and within the community at large, kind of what we do, what we expect, and how we respond and how we work with behaviors? So you were really encouraged to look within your district to start to examine, start to explore, and start to understand who do we say we are and how do we do our work? Because as you start to continue moving forward with the DSFI or with any of these implementation drivers, it's always helpful to see how the pieces connect. And the last thing that you were encouraged to do was to look at your transition systems. We know students move between buildings and across campuses, whether that's just a horizontal transition. We also have vertical transitions where students are moving up to another level from, say, elementary to middle, or from middle to high. What are those systems that are in place to continue the good solid work of PBIS and support students through those transitions? So we're going to start our time together today with a really quick visioning lab. And I know and want to give kudos to Tina and Kelly for creating this space with these sessions on a monthly basis, because it was designed to give people the opportunity to listen with each other, to learn from each other, and really just to start exploring the possibilities. It's always helpful to kind of hear from each other how you've overcome a barrier or how you're thinking about something. So we're going to create that opportunity today, because what we know is every district has a story and we want to know yours. So this is a friendly reminder, prompt, pre-correct, whatever terminology you like to use, that this is a safe place to share. It's a great place to share ideas and receive ideas. And because we're doing these virtually, feel free to turn your camera on and feel like you're actually in the room with us. unmute yourself. You can also post things through the chat, and Lisa and I will do the best that we can to facilitate kind of that Q&A with the chat. But I really encourage you to engage and unmute and just feel like you're on the air with us. So let's start by talking about policy. We specifically want to check back where we were last time talking about policy. We had 5 different items from the DSFI. And so let's start a conversation with just how has your district made that move towards social, emotional, behavioral health? Specifically, what's your vision and mission statement? How has that transferred into actual goals? And then what's the support that exists within the district? Now, Lisa and I, we want to play by the same rules as everybody else. So we're going to share our experiences with the districts we work with, while that gives you a chance to kind of listen and learn and organize your own thoughts that you might feel comfortable sharing. So in the district that I work with, policy has not been one of their action items on their action plan. And what I hope that you take away from these sessions is that there's a lot of items. You can't do everything right off the bat. And so you have to pick and choose based upon what you feel your priorities are. Our team, our district leadership team, said it is important to have a vision and mission statement to promote this work. So they started modeling that themselves. They created a vision and mission statement for the district leadership team, because in doing that, it gave them talking points. It gave them kind of street cred, so to speak. It gave them a presence within the district. So when people said, what are we doing and why do you guys exist as a team? They had a vision, mission statement for their own team. The ultimate goal over the next few years is to grow that team's statement up to something larger at the district level. Because what they have been focused on is that bottom part there, really building that supportive lead administrators. We had building level leadership very much in support of this work, but we know that we can't really move forward until we've got executive level leadership. So that's how they've worked to really start to tackle some of these things that ultimately have an impact on policy, is getting the major players in the district on board and really in the groove. Lisa, what's been your experience?
Kelsey, are you asking me to focus on these 3 specific questions?
Yeah, let's just start with these 3.
Yep. And I would say several of the districts we work in are building the foundation to answer some of the questions that come next. And while they get to the policy section in the DSFI, they're reluctant to start on that right away, because they need to feel confident that they are matched to the vision and mission of the district, and they do have attainable goals. So what I'll talk about is how it's kind of evolved when we get to the next set of questions. But one of the districts we were working with really focused on, they had a district team that had completed the DSFI, they changed leadership, and within that second year, the new leader came in and said, well, we have a good vision and mission, but I'm not sure our goals are SMART goals. So they went back and spent their time really defining their SMART goals. And what was helpful about that is they were able to then include implementation fidelity, because what their goals were really around were around outcomes. And so they added goals to include fidelity of implementation that set them up for more success, because it was data they were looking at as well. And then they were accountable to their executive leadership and to their Board of Education. And the leaders who work on this, I think I talked about this last time, but it really related a lot in the policy section, because the executive director that was responsible for the district leadership team had a lot of decision-making authority. When it came to policy, she needed to connect with the whole executive leadership team, because it also related to the Board of Education. So she couldn't do it on her own. She needed to make sure she always kept in the loop. And her superintendent would say, we're not ready for this yet, but keep laying the foundation. Now, when we get to the next slide, we'll talk about when they became ready. But it took a while for them to say, this is the time to do it.
I think, Lisa, one of the great things that you shared in that example is we're not ready yet, but keep laying the foundation. I think that's going to be the journey for a lot of districts, that this is a big one that takes time. And I think it's also great, Lisa, that you brought into the conversation the role of the Board of Education, because I know that from one state or Commonwealth to another, what you call that Board of Education may differ and kind of what their boundaries and kind of the sphere of influence versus sphere of concern may differ from one state and Commonwealth to another. But I know here for us in Missouri, boards of education are very important because they do establish the policies and kind of codify the policies for our district. So let's open it up to you all. What have you done in terms, or where is your district in terms of embedding social, emotional, behavioral health into your vision or mission statement, establishing goals related to that, or working to build the support of key leaders and administrators in your district?
I can go.
Hi, Gina.
Hi.
Thanks
can
for going
speak
first.
Oh, you're welcome. No pressure or anything. But no, I can kind of speak to that a little bit. We kind of revamped our mission statement, and actually, of course, trying to look for it now as we're talking about it. But when we went virtual, we've, over the summer, our school had a team come together to really talk about kind of the new mission statement going forward. And I wish I had it offhand. I apologize, I don't know it off the top of my head, but in it, we kind of made it one of our missions to focus on social emotional health this year. And we've already started by implementing different SEL programs district-wide for most of our students. We had a couple of curriculums for our specific populations, and a couple other curriculums that we've implemented with our middle school and our freshmen. And then the hope is by next year that every single grade will receive some type of SEL curriculum. So that's one thing, and that we've really kind of been able to implement this year, which has been going really well. And you still have some of the students who are not that into it yet, but the hope is that the more you do it, and starting our little kindergartners with it, and even our pre-K students, the hope is that it just becomes part of the curriculum every year. And actually, in one of our meetings today, they said that as of Friday in the state of Pennsylvania, that's going to be Social Emotional Learning Day in the state of Pennsylvania on the 26th. I don't know if anyone else heard that. So we're going to start off the day by everyone in the district having 10 minutes of some kind of mindfulness that day. So our district and our superintendent's really on board with the SEL component, which is really nice.
Thanks, Gina, for sharing. It sounds like if I heard what you shared, that kind of the catalyst for this look at your vision and mission statement and SEL really was the pandemic, and how do we support kids during what's going on. I know that's a big focal point for a lot of districts. There's actually a Department of Education, a U.S. Department of Education summit that's happening right now, talking about, as we return to school in the fall, how do we make sure that social, emotional, behavioral health and well-being is part of that. So I think there's going to be a lot of districts that look to see, okay, where does this align with our vision and mission statement?
Yeah, and I think some of us as specialists, we knew that that's what we needed, but it kind of did take the pandemic to kind of make that big push for it and realize how important that piece is. And now even more is going to be, which is a good, and at least it's something positive to take away from all of this.
Silver linings, silver linings. Christy, I see you've got your hand raised.
Hello. So in our district, we do have a pretty strong focus in terms of social emotional learning right now. We're actually this year piloting the Second Step program in K-5. And we also, in the past, I want to say it would be 3 years now, we actually developed a new role within our district called a school climate coordinator. So we have 13 elementary buildings, and for every 2 elementaries, there's one school climate coordinator who really is focused on helping to disseminate the information of Second Step, making sure it's being implemented with fidelity. It's not just sitting on the back shelf to help support. They also kind of take on a role at certain times, I hate to say as like assistant principal, but more of like the emotional piece of the assistant principal type of person who can also be a support system in that lens. So those are a few actionable goals that we've been working towards.
Thanks, Christy, for sharing that story from your district. I mean, because it is just what you described, it's actionable goals. You've identified this is where we want to be. And so let's make sure that we've got the resources that'll help us achieve those goals. Let's take a look. There are some other aspects related to policy. And when we think about policy, it's also about how we respond to behavior errors, how we respond to things that happen because life happens. Students are not always going to perform the expected behavior. But what we want to see in policy, our ultimate goal is that there's an instructional approach and that those policies are reviewed to make sure that they are doing what we hope they would and that we can find ways to enhance their effect. Because if we have policies in place that are limiting student success, we need to take a step back and reevaluate those policies and work to refine those policies. And then we also want to have some things that support our students through transitions. I mentioned earlier, whether it's a horizontal transition or a vertical transition, we don't want somebody just kind of doing good work because they know they should do good work. I always go back to, what if you win the lottery? Okay, when you win the lottery and you leave the district and all these awesome things that you've created to help students transition, all that good stuff goes with you too. So how do we create these lasting systems that really have their foundation within some larger district policies? So Lisa, you mentioned earlier, this has kind of been where your districts invested. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks. I'm going to share 2 examples from 2 different districts on how they move this forward. One, the district that I was talking about that wanted to work on policy earlier and their superintendent said not yet, and they laid the foundation. What nudged them to move a little bit in this area was when the Board of Education membership changed and they got a new board member. And that board member was very vocal about mental health and wellness and wanted the district to really evaluate their exclusionary practices. So that led to, well, we have a team and the team can do this. So that sort of answered that board member's need right away. And so the team then got together and looked at their disciplinary policy handbooks and their practices, and they were then able to integrate instructional approaches into that work. And so it kind of was just perfect timing. Another district that we've worked with has a regular process for reviewing their discipline policies. So every 2 years, they pull together the community to look at their discipline handbook. And they do this all the way elementary, middle, and high school. And the community then provides input, and then they make the revisions based on the community input. What they changed and started to do is they provided a presentation prior explaining what sort of the PBS was, the multi-tiered model, the logic behind that, so that the community and family members could understand how it could look different than it looks currently, and what are some things that we might consider. So then they really began advocating for, well, we need supports for children, and we need to know as family members what those supports are available within the district. So those were just 2 different approaches, and it did take time for both of those approaches. It's not a quick, it's getting people involved and really having good conversations and making sure that the community, that you are getting a good representation from your community across the entire district. These were sort of large districts, so they had to pay attention to that.
I appreciate how you describe 2 different approaches, Lisa, because I think that's oftentimes what we see within a district is that you have grassroots and top down kind of all working at the same time to impact and affect change. Because in the district that I work with, it took a new building administrator moving in from another district to all of a sudden go, time out. Why do we do it this way? When you work sometimes in districts and it's people that are moving into leadership positions from the classroom or from another department or program within the district, sometimes we don't have that double check or that level of aha moment that we might have when it's somebody brand new from outside. And so this new administrator came in and said, so we have a policy that if a student doesn't complete their work, they have to spend time in ISS, and then they get out of the work completely. And so it took that conversation where people just asking, why do we do it this way, to really say, okay, we don't have an instructional approach. We're not teaching students what it is that we expect. And so that's how that conversation got started. Let's turn it over to you guys and open up the lines. Talk to us about what are the policies that are in place with you. I see you laughing, Tina. What are the policies that you guys have worked to really bring alive within your district that promote that instructional approach? Or do you have policies in your district to promote that instructional approach? Did you find between last session and today that it's more about consequences and punitive responses?
I would be interested if any of our target sites have progressive discipline in their school of conduct, and if that's going to be something that they'll take a look at. I know I was just recently talking to somebody about a district that we were supporting where they had their level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 behaviors, how they were working to how we work to look at how some of those could be defined as minors and majors. And that's language that our teams all are familiar with here. So I don't know, do any of you, and don't feel bad if you have progressive discipline, but just has there been any conversation around that and the implications of that with the PBIS model?
Hey, Tina, this is Tim Sable over at Erie's Public Schools. I'll jump in. So in 2018, the district, well, actually 2016-17, the district went through a strategic planning process, which was really a valuable process involving lots of stakeholders, and we came up with a strategic plan. And so kind of going back out, pulling it back out to that 200,000-foot view, Kelsey, that you were referring to, right? Getting that vision and mission, right? And so our kind of mission statement is, in Erie's Public Schools, we champion high levels of student engagement and personalized pathways to educational excellence for every student without exception. So that's that overarching mission, right? But then within the strategic plan, we broke that down into 5 aspirational goals. And one of those aspirational goals really went to equity, fairness, and justice for all learners. And it reads, every learner receives fair and equitable treatment regarding personal conduct and access to educational resources to spur each student's growth and eliminate disproportionalities in achievement and discipline practices. So there's that really nice firm goal statement. And then within that, it was broken down into a couple of specific strategies. 1, decrease disproportionality in suspension and expulsion rates. 2, increase achievement rates for traditionally underperforming students. And then 3, increase timely access to rigorous courses, programs, and interventions for traditionally underperforming students. And so we were really excited when we moved forward with this work. But to your point, Tina, when we look at our discipline handbook, it's the same discipline handbook we had from 2016, 2017, with some changes, some minor changes. And so, Lisa, I really appreciate your words today to remind myself and Ken and Jill and Jack, you're on the call too, I know, that it's okay to go slow. And to build that foundation. And then when the moment comes, it'll be the right moment. And we'll be able to push this initiative really to the level that it needs to be in the district, right? So we identify all those goals, but we still find ourselves left without a lot of strategies to achieve those goals. And certainly we believe PBIS is definitely one of those strategies. So that's kind of where Erie's Public Schools is at this current time.
And I think that's really cool. And that's what I love about this conversation is the division there or the separateness of that. And so the whole purpose of this is how can you, now start to edge your way closer to what your aspirations are, right? Thanks, Tim. And I have had a Pimente's Brothers sandwich, just so you know.
And I see that Nicole put through the chat, she commented, Tim, on that level of explicitness and how specific everything was in the language that you shared and how necessary that is. And I think that's also important for us to understand. And we'll kind of see that through some of the examples that we look at today when we talk about job descriptions and interview questions, and how important it is to call things by their name and to be explicit with our wording so that, on our team, we talk about clear is kind. When we are clear, there is no ambiguity and everybody understands where they stand and why we're doing what we're doing. And I appreciate you picking up on what Lisa shared, that, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And for a lot of our districts, they don't tackle policy the first year because of what Lisa shared. And so I really applaud that, go what you've identified for Erie, we're going to go slow. We're going to lay that foundation. There will be things that we cycle back to because we know we have to come back, as you said, when the time's right. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Any final questions or thoughts related to policy before we jump into our new content for today? All right. Today, we're going to take a look at workforce capacity. And so with workforce capacity, what it is that we're trying to understand is how within our district, you can see we're still up there at executive team functions. We're starting to close out that top row. We're going to talk today specifically about personnel selection criteria. If we have this mission and vision statement to say who we are, and we've identified these goals, it's kind of like we've got the bus, and the bus is on the freeway and it's headed in the right direction. With personnel selection criteria, job descriptions, and performance evaluations, we're going to be about the business of ensuring we have the right people on the bus in the right seats. So that way we can really get to our destination as effectively and efficiently as possible. Much like what we've done in our previous sessions together, we've got a main idea, or a feature of the DSFI. We'll share a main idea to kind of boil things down and summarize and synthesize into kind of some everyday language that when you go back with your teams to administer the DSFI and somebody says, I'm not 100% sure what this is asking, you've got another way to say it. You've got some talking points or a script that you could use to facilitate some really rich conversation. We'll also today share some quick checks, some reflective prompts or team assessment. If you are the district coach or the district facilitator for PBIS and you're leading a group through the DSFI, it's always nice sometimes when they say, yep, we're definitely a 2, to be able to ask some reflective prompts, to ask some reflective questions, to really get them to a place of ensuring that level of consensus on whatever the score is. And then throughout our time together, we've got checkpoints. So we can check in with you, make sure that you have a chance to ask questions and get clarifications. And then we've also got some discussion starters and prompts built in, much like what we just did with policy. But let's go ahead and we'll start with 5.1. This is all about personnel selection criteria. And as I mentioned, you've got the feature, the possible data sources, but I think the big takeaway here is that what we're trying to do is to enhance our hiring practices. We want to enhance our collaboration for recruitment, making sure that we've got people coming into our district, that we're trying to recruit people that are a good fit for our district, not only in terms of what they can do and what they know, but they mirror our community, because that's also valuable for the students, for our families, and just our community at large. And so we want to be able, with personnel selection criteria, to enhance these hiring practices, to positively impact our interview questions, scoring criteria that might be used to make determinations, and that there should be this level of communication that exists between a district's human resources department and the actual district leadership team for PBIS. And so in thinking about that, some quick checks or reflective prompts might be just thinking, well, who's talking to human resources about what our vision is for PBIS or what our goals are? And you can see there's a lot of questions here on the screen to kind of prompt that quick check, thinking about, do we even have job descriptions that outline and specify PBIS implementation or the functions of doing that? Have we shared with human resources what we as the district leadership team would listen for or look for, maybe during a screening interview? So this is really getting at that level of connection, collaboration, and communication that exists between the people who are doing the hiring or starting the hiring processes. And, you know, maybe that's the recruitment and the posting of a job vacancy or a job posting, and then just the actual, lots of districts have kind of open calls for applicants where you may go into a district auditorium or a district gym and kind of move through a really standardized formal screening process. But throughout whatever our hiring practices are, we want to make sure that we've identified this is who we're looking for. In order to achieve these goals, to actually live this mission and vision, we're looking for some key people. What we're going to offer for you is an example, and I'll give you way more when I send the resources to Tina, but here's some sample interview questions. If I was going to interview an administrator, making sure that this person would be a good fit for PBIS implementation, then I might want to ask questions about what they do or how they respond to teachers in classrooms that have difficulty with classroom management. Or knowing that sometimes we have students that get sent to the office for whatever their behavior may be. If I'm going to hire you to be a building leader, I want to know about your approach to problem or challenging behavior, or what your experience level with a multi-tier system of support is. So those are ways that I can infuse PBIS into my personnel selection criteria. And very similarly with teachers, you know, if I'm going to have a teacher in charge of a classroom and we're implementing PBIS in this building or across these campuses, I want to make sure that's part of that interview process to really make sure we're selecting the best candidates for the job. So those are just a few questions. We'll give you more today. Administrators, teachers, classified staff. I think we've got some additional questions if you're looking to hire a PBIS coach or a district coordinator. We want to make sure that we're giving you some tools in your toolbox. The big idea being that in order to achieve these goals, to live out this mission and vision, we've got to pick the right people for the job. So thinking about picking the right people, okay, now we want to make sure we're recruiting and we've got these job descriptions that are going to set people up for success. So with 5.2, it is just about that job description, making sure that we are embedding in the job description not only the standard legal information that needs to be there, as well as lots of times we have job descriptions that pertain to academic instruction or just the day-to-day procedures that go along with whatever that position is. But we also want to include PBIS implementation. We're saying that we're implementing this district-wide, it needs to be in our job descriptions, because when we clearly articulate the expectations, you know, if you're hired for whatever this role is, we're going to look for you to do X, Y, and Z that relates back to PBIS implementation. Well, we're setting these people up for success. They understand coming in with even just the application, this is what this job's looking for. And then we want to be sure within the job description that we're also identifying the time that it would take and that would be available for this person to be successful in this role, to be successful with that job description. So in terms of some job descriptions, there's some reflective questions there. A great place for you all to start would be to review what you have currently. We're kind of in that spring era or that time of year where we start forecasting the next year. I know here in Missouri, teachers have until March 15th. That's kind of the evaluation cycle. And so about March 15th, we start to know this person's retiring, this person's moving on to another district. And March is really the big window of time where job descriptions start popping up and people start looking for what's going to happen next year. This may be a good time in your Commonwealth to understand what are the jobs that are going to be available for next year. And if we're saying we're implementing PBIS, how do our descriptions really promote that? How are we explicitly saying that this job is going to be expected to implement PBIS? And we want people who are knowledgeable and are bringing in knowledge of a multi-tier system of support. So a great way to start that conversation might be going to some existing fidelity measures, whether that's the TFI or the self-assessment survey, the SAS, and drawing language out of those measures that you could then insert into some job descriptions. Talking about maybe establishing expectations or establishing routines and procedures, behavior-specific feedback. Those are all things that we would hope to see within, say, a classroom teacher job description. We'll also give you today some example job descriptions. Here's some example statements from what we would hope to see, say, if it was an administrator role or somebody that is a classroom teacher or a certified staff member. And you can see it doesn't have to be incredibly detailed. We still have a level of specificity without getting into the minutia. So, for a classroom teacher, we're expecting that this person's going to implement social, emotional, behavioral systems such as PBIS. If I'm looking for a job and I see this in a job description and I don't know what social, emotional, behavioral systems are, if I don't know what PBIS is, then I'm likely not going to apply because I've gotten that level of specificity in the job description. Versus somebody like Lisa, let's use Lisa as an example. I come from a district that's already implementing a multi-tier system of support. I do know what social, emotional, behavioral systems are. My building just started implementing PBIS and now my spouse has been transferred and I'm looking for a new job. I am who you want. And so having these statements within a job description really helps you narrow the field because the people who are applying are kind of narrowing their lens. Like I said, we'll give you resources, and here's just a quick shot. We'll give you job descriptions for administrators, for certified staff, for classified staff, for district coaches. As you start to look ahead to building the materials that go along with vacancies and postings, consider how you can really put PBIS front and center, how you can put a social, emotional, behavioral system front and center, so that way you're recruiting and retaining the right people. Last but not least, and then we're going to open up those lines again, performance evaluations. So if 5.1 was all about, okay, we got to work with HR to make sure that our hiring practices are in alignment with our mission and vision. 5.2 was the job description. So now we're making sure that the right people are really getting hired and that we've got the job description to set us up for success and helping them be effective in their role. Well, now we've actually got people. 5.3 is about that performance evaluation, where just like with students, we're going to give feedback. We need to be about the business of giving feedback to the adults in our environment and across our campuses. So with 5.3, we're thinking about how we can embed PBIS implementation into that annual evaluation process. And that's why those job descriptions become pretty powerful. If we've already in the job description outlined the different things that we're expecting related to implementation, well, now we get to come back, or they have the opportunity to come back with the evaluations and check in on those things. In Missouri, we also not only just have our job descriptions and evaluations, but we have professional development plans and professional growth plans. So when I was a classroom teacher and even as a building administrator, I had to establish goals for myself that then became part of my annual evaluation process, that whoever my supervisor was going to check in with me on as part of that. And so having that PBIS language front and center, espousing our social, emotional, behavioral systems, help people who are moving through that process also self-select goals. And then from a training and coaching perspective, it really does impact to be able to look and see, okay, how many of our staff might be struggling in this area? We can provide some supports to help them move from good to great. There's lots of different ways that we could use performance evaluations to really enhance our workforce capacity. So you've got some quick checks that a team could use related to performance evaluations. I want to draw your attention to that third bullet. I know that each state and Commonwealth is a little bit different in terms of what must be a part of that evaluation process. So I think it's important to consider, where is the natural linkage? How could we take what we're required to do by the state or the Commonwealth and link PBIS implementation into it? That's going to help you sustain this work long term, because you are working to make sure you're in alignment with that larger state or Commonwealth education agency. And so let's open it up to you all for a checkpoint and a quick check. This is a time for you to ask questions, get clarification on anything that we've talked about related to workforce capacity, be it personnel selection, job descriptions, or even performance evaluations. I see Becky put something through the chat that we can easily align indicator 2 from the Danielson framework, since this is all around how the professional manages the classroom and relationships with students. I see Tina nodding along with that. I know in the district that I work with, we tackled job descriptions most recently. There was going to be a turnover in a lot of the administrative positions. And so it was the opportunity to go, okay, we can't change every single job description across the district, because that would just be too cumbersome right off the bat. But let's make small change. Okay, these are the ones that we have open this year. Let's see how we can infuse PBIS into these new administrator job descriptions.
Kelsey, this is Lisa. Make a quick connection to that for some tips, because it's hiring time, right? So a couple things we've learned is having a couple questions are helpful. If you have a rubric with some common responses you would be looking for, that helps your HR staff, because often HR are doing 100 million things and say, we're really listening for these 3 things. When it gets to the interview, let's just say it's a classroom teacher. This has been brilliant from one of the districts that I've worked with, is they have sent to the interview candidate prior, we are a PBIS school. Here's the link to the Center on PBIS. Just review it before you come, because there may be some questions around that. So it isn't that they have to know all the answers. It's we're looking for someone with a growth mindset who's really willing to learn, and we're setting the stage for this is who we are. And that has been super helpful for them as they've thought about how do we get really the people we want, because maybe they haven't had a chance to have exposure yet.
I love that, Lisa, that we're not looking for the expert. We're looking for somebody who's willing to engage
and learn. The last thing, and I'm not sure if this is true in your state, but one of the things I'm sort of hearing on the ground is these grants that are starting to pop up with wellness coaches and or wellness rooms that you're kind of building in schools, and they're hiring some people, or to reduce suspension. I think this matches what Tim was talking about as well, kind of hiring some people to have reduction in suspension. And one of the things they put it in the job, they hadn't put it in the job description, any of the proactive positive strategies. And that helped them really think about, we could easily link this work to the work we've been doing with PBS. So those are 3 things that just came to mind as you were chatting.
And then I see Ken or Kenneth, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. I was just going to share a little bit. So one thing that this kind of came up with, not really at the HR level yet, but definitely the first wave was more about the individual schools. They wanted to know more about when they get new teachers. So we do have a new teacher induction program, as we have to for as far as the state's requirement. But it was more about like putting together a video that was something that could be shown to new teachers, that could be shown to parents, to students, because we do have sort of a high transitional district at times. Kids do move different schools to different schools. So having something streamlined like a video that could be showed could really help build some of that consistency and structure when people become, newly oriented to the buildings. So I just wanted to share that was something that and it's not across the district. It's in pockets at most of our buildings, though, I believe, do have some type of like a video or some type of maybe recorded their assemblies, or something like that, so that the people become familiar. We did talk about this last year a little bit as a district leadership team, and as far as like being able to put some questions around human resources. And so, I have shared just a couple questions, right? Simple questions around PBIS. But it's a very good point and a good reminder, because we have had, a new HR director in place. So I think this is all in good timing, because especially right now, everything's hot, and, we're looking to hire and, really fill some of the gaps that have occurred over the pandemic. So I appreciate the points and especially the slide on 5.1 with some of those questions.
Thank you so much for sharing kind of how your district has been thinking about this. And I'm going to use the word grappling, because I think we're always grappling with this, just to make sure that we're doing it the right way. And I love that you brought up your new human resources director. We touched on this, gosh, it was December when we touched about leadership teaming, but I think it's important to remind ourselves, human resource representatives, whether it's the director or the assistant or somebody that is in the know when it comes to human resources, is a great member of your district leadership team. Because as we start talking about a lot of these things, they're going to know things that the average district leadership team member isn't going to know, just because the jobs are different. And so including those people on that larger leadership team really helps with long-term sustainability. Let's go ahead and we'll move from workforce capacity into talking about training. So now we've got our people. And you can see on the slide, we're moving from that top row where it's the executive team functions, starting down now into the bottom where we're talking about the implementation, just kind of the day-to-day, we're doing PBIS. And I think it's important right here to stop and kind of hold the lens back. Sometimes there's that misperception that PBIS really just is training and coaching. Just kind of the day-to-day about I'm establishing expectations and routines. I've got strategies to respond to expected behavior versus behavior errors, and that's all got a place. But I hope that you can see we've now covered 5 different strands of the DSFI that are all about creating the context, creating that larger infrastructure that's designed to support the day-to-day work. So with strand 6, we're going to be talking about these 6 items, from creating that plan and having a calendar to move the plan forward, all the way down to things like a community of practice, or having people and capacity to facilitate internal professional development, that you get to a place where you're not relying on external professional development or external trainers, but you've built that in-house capacity. So as we're talking about this today and understanding that when we come back together in April, we're going to move to coaching, I want you to take away today that training is an event, and it's coaching that's going to connect these boxes. When we think about training, you're going to have your district PBIS leadership team. You're also going to have your school-wide teams, those teams at the campus level. And then you're going to have training events that help people become knowledgeable and successful implementing at tier 1, as well as implementing at tiers 2 and 3. And the content of each event is going to be different. But training is an event. It just happens, and we don't want it to exist in isolation. So when we come back next month, we're going to talk about coaching, because it's coaching that connects these boxes and connects these events. I also want to draw your attention to the training and professional development blueprint that the Center on PBIS put out a few years ago. If you haven't had the opportunity to look at this and kind of understand the content that's available, really encourage you to do so. I will share a copy with Tina as a resource. So that way, you know, when you go to look at the resources that go along with this session, it's bing, bang, boom right there for you. But what we did several years ago was try to establish what would be the blueprint. If you wanted to create a district-wide professional development plan that helped people move from the exploration stage all the way to the innovation stage, and from tier 1 all the way to tier 3, what would be the elements that need to be in place to really do this successfully and to sustain that work? So it's a great resource that I want to draw your attention to. As we look at the items on the DSFI, 6.1 is just about creating the plan. And that's why that blueprint that I just showed is so helpful, because it talks through all the logistics, kind of the nuts and bolts, and even the minutia that is oftentimes very important because the devil's in the details. It's going to guide you through what's necessary for creating that larger plan. Because the ultimate goal in your district creating a plan is that you've got a plan, not just a PD plan, but a PD plan that outlines and includes social, emotional, behavioral systems, much like the PBIS framework. And that your plan is guided by implementation data, and it's linked back to that vision and mission, who we said that we are and what we said we're trying to achieve. Because in order to scale and sustain, so scaling just from one building to the next and expanding across the district and then keeping that work going, we do have to have a professional development system. There's too many people in our district to support them individually, just one building administrator to one teacher, or one building administrator to one classified staff member. We want to have larger systems in place to support everybody, regardless of their level or role. And when we take that system and we map it back to data in terms of what if we were to take a look at the TFI, areas that we're strong in versus areas that we could grow in, it's going to make our larger professional development system much more effective, much more efficient. So we're going to give you some quick checks, things that you could talk through with a team to make sure that you've got a really solid professional development plan. Thinking about, if I were to go to our district, pull out our plan, I could likely find things related to reading instruction, could likely find things related to math or whatever the content area is. But do I also find social, emotional, behavioral in that plan? Looking at that plan, to what degree is data used to make decisions about what the training content is, or how the scope and sequence is organized and how it plays out? And then can I find the natural connections, or hopefully the explicit connection between our district's mission and vision and why we're teaching, training, and coaching on whatever this element is? So what we oftentimes do with districts is encourage them to use data to guide that decision making. So I could go to the TFI. I could look across campuses, across buildings, and see just at, say, tier 1. Where are we fully implemented? Where are we partially implemented? Where are we not implementing? Kind of how could I use that data from just that single fidelity measure, the TFI, to really identify how we're doing within a district to create, say, cohorts that may be accessed for professional development opportunities. And from that, we always encourage the comparison between the TFI and the self-assessment survey, because the TFI is taken by the building's PBIS leadership team. So these are the people that are implementing PBIS, they're doing it, versus the SAS, which is that whole district, whole building approach. So that nice look in the mirror. Here's an example from a district. You can see TFI scores on the left in comparison to SAS scores on the right. And if you look within the red circles, you can kind of see, wow, the team really felt that we had a high level of implementation, anywhere that's noted in green, versus everyone else in the building not echoing that, not really feeling we're implementing to that degree or to that level. So by looking at the data points, say if we had a professional development plan, we may be providing, in this instance, tier 1. The tier 1 team says we're really doing it, but the rest of the staff doesn't really feel that. So we may re-engineer our professional development to make sure that we are providing more opportunities, more resource, more events to move that implementation at tier 1 forward. And then hopefully next year, when we look at the data, we see much more similar results and scores. Moving from that plan into an actual calendar. Okay, so the plan's telling us these are the things that we want to cover. The calendar is actually going to help us say this is when it's happening. And so with the calendar, we want to be able to not just create it for the team, but we want to publicly post it, because we want anyone within the district that is working to get better at implementing PBIS to know, okay, there's an opportunity on Thursday at 4 for an in-session, a professional development session on behavior-specific feedback. Okay, I have been told by my administrator that's something that I could take advantage of, or maybe that was an area on my personal reflection, my personal growth plan that I identified I wanted to get better in. That's something that I could take. And so having this calendar that's designed and developed and publicly posted gives people that level of awareness of it's not just who we say we are, we're actually creating opportunities for the district to get better in these areas. And with this, thinking about, and I'm going to draw your attention to the last bullet here, that they specify prerequisite knowledge or the intended audience. Lisa and I were having a conversation the other day about we oftentimes have repeated training. And let's say that we've got a repeated training about intensive interventions or tier 3 behavior support plans and how to do function-based problem solving. You are a brand new teacher, okay? And you're still learning tier 1. Yes, at some point in time, you want to get to tier 3, but you've got to use your tier 1 knowledge first and understand the natural connections, because we know that tier 2 builds on tier 1 and tier 3 builds on tier 2 and tier 1 as well. And so making sure that people understand before I pick this opportunity, I know what the prerequisite knowledge is, and I even know if it's a right fit for me as an audience member. That gives them agency to make sure that they're picking the right things to move themselves forward. And then let's look at one more before we check in with each other, kind of open those lines up again. With this professional development plan, so we've got our plan, we've got our calendar, we want to make sure that what we're doing is overtly aligned to other things that are happening in the district, so other relevant district initiatives. So when we look at our training materials, we want to see that if we're training on trauma, for example, if I go to a training on trauma, that training content is aligned back to our larger social, emotional, behavioral work with PBIS and a multi-tier system of support framework. We want to make sure that these things aren't just siloed and disconnected and living in isolation, because that's not ultimately helpful for the people that are going to be charged with doing the work on a day-to-day basis. We want to be able to show people that level of alignment, draw those connections, and it's going to help us sustain PBIS longer because people are seeing those connections. And so we've given you some professional development alignment quick checks, things that you could take back before we come back together in April and just kind of do a little digging, if you will, around your district, looking at your professional development plan, trying to see to what degree have we aligned this work with the other things that we're doing. So let's open it up back to some conversation, whether that be a clarifying question and answer, or thinking about how has your district organized and planned for PBIS training?
Kelsey, one thing I want to say before we, open it up to the, open the lines up. I love that. Is in Pennsylvania, we, as part of the network, we require a fidelity measure, and it's based on where you are in the process. It's either the TIC, the BOQ, or the TFI. But consistently throughout the whole process, we require the self-assessment survey along with the school safety survey. So I really appreciated how you showed at the district level, that data is just as important to help overall look at what's our training needs across all of our buildings as well, and how we can tap into that data to answer certain questions. And so I just appreciate the fact that we ask our staff to complete these things, and we really do want folks to know the data needs to be used to inform our practices. And you just validated that for me, and I appreciate that.
Well, thanks for speaking up and saying something, because I'm excited to share that our team here at Mizzou is actually leading the work on revising the self-assessment survey, so that way it's much more of a parallel tool to, say, the TFI. So that way we can really see apples to apples much clearer. And as well, we're also working on a practice guide to help people use that data to differentiate their training and coaching plans, because it's one thing for us to talk the talk. Let's help people actually walk the walk and actually look into that data and see, how could I create cohorts that are all needing the same type of content or information? From your all's perspective, what's happening related to PBIS training in your district?
Kelsey and Tina, if I could just add too, I think that what we found valuable is overlaying that data, not just that perceptual data, but also then actual student discipline data, because that sometimes can be another disconnect. Like you had said, Kelsey, sometimes you might have a perception from the team that's here, but the staff perception might be here. And then the discipline data might be. And so overlaying that actual data sometimes, especially when you start having conversations around disproportionality, sometimes those can be challenging conversations to have with folks. And they look for reasons why it's happening or why it's not happening. And that really kind of flushes out all of those excuses and gets people right down to the nitty gritty of, regardless of what we think, in our perceptions, this is the output. And if our goal is to better this, then we need to really take a look at making some significant changes. So I just wanted to add that I think that actual behavior data overlay really makes it even more powerful.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you adding that into the conversation. And I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think Lisa would echo that as well. We've got what we as adults think, and a part of that is what the team who's actually leading the work thinks, but it's so much more real. It's so much more powerful when you actually see, are we getting the outcomes we hope we would or plan to get based upon these things that we're doing, and what's the interplay between those? Thank you so much for bringing student outcomes into that conversation. Ken, I apologize. It says Kenneth. I don't know if it's Ken, so please set me on the right path, but I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Morris. It's no problem. I usually go by Ken, you're right.
Okay.
But I appreciate it. So the one thing I was just thinking in terms of the district organizing plan for PBIS, I mean, I have to say that definitely thankful for Tim and Jackie and Jill. They stand alongside with me as facilitators for our district. But what we've done is basically put together, I mean, I wanted to share that what's nice is we've put together a clear chart, a succinct chart that tells our schools exactly, what level of training they're going to have, what the district coaches are going to train, what the buildings are going to go through. And we have it broke down by tiers, of course. So like our universal is not going to go with the tier 2 with the tier 2 advanced schools, because that's two different conversations and levels. So that's basically what we've done, is like framed out. We have the universal going, you get the tier 1s going, implementing our initial, then you also have your tier 2 advanced. And I just want to say that one thing that we've done is we've partnered with our IU5 team. So Kevin Weber and Renee and Danielle, they've done a tremendous job of working with us and partnering. So if we all can't be split apart, or if people have building commitments, because each of them are building either building administrators or, they're all building administrators, principals, or assistants. So we have the ability to have the IU come alongside and support with like the more advanced tier 2 schools, so they can kind of keep that conversation and keep that scale up like pushed and encouraged. So I just wanted to share out, that's what we've done. It was totally different this year, as a lot of people said, because of the pandemic. We definitely had to pull back and couldn't do those, the meetings, or we couldn't really meet the schedule as we wanted to. But things are starting to prosper a little more and come back into fruition in terms of meetings being held and that type of conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. As you were sharing, I think it brings to light a lot of ideas for people in terms of training content. I love what you described in terms of, we have teams that are at tier 1 or tier 2 advanced, and here's the content that we're going to be walking people through. That level of organization is so critical. And I would add to the conversation as we move into fall 2021, and there's this big push for return to school and return to school as we have known it in years past. How can you work to create that level of alignment where, just as an example, oftentimes in academic training sessions, we talk about engaging students in the instruction. How do we help people see the connection and the link that when we're engaging in instruction, that's opportunities to respond. And oftentimes we put opportunities to respond in its own little box with PBIS, but we're actually using it in a lot of other places. And so as we have this big push to return to school in a much more conventional and normal way, how do we help drive that level of alignment? In the time that we've got left, we're going to wrap up this strand on training, and we're going to start by talking about ongoing. So if we have these training events, like I mentioned earlier, where it's, here's our scope and sequence, here's what's happening. We've put the postings out there so people can identify, is this the right training for me, or is this a training for my cohort? We also want to add to that we have these things that happen on an annual basis or a very routine basis, where I know I'm going to have new people coming into the district. I need an orientation session. Or maybe I'm not new, I'm returning. It's always helpful to have a refresher on who we are, what we say we do, and how we go through and do these. So, it's always great to have a refresher on expectations and establishing them, or responding to behavior, whether that's behavior that meets our expectations or doesn't. And so the main idea with this ongoing PD is that we're institutionalizing. We're really solidifying and laying that bedrock foundation of implementation of PBIS because it's built into the things we do every year. It's part of just our annual work with new and returning individuals. And so we've given you some quick checks to think about, as you start to make plans for, in Missouri, it would be August. I don't know if the start date in Pennsylvania is August or September, but I know a lot of our districts they're looking at their calendar. They're paying attention to COVID restrictions, absolutely, but looking at what's being expected of them and thinking, okay, how do I do my new teacher trainings? Or in the district that I'm working with right now, they're trying to think about, if we can't do a large teacher orientation at central office like we always have, how do we maybe push out some videos over the summer to where it's kind of like PD in your PJs, so to speak, but it's these short videos that capture what we would have done in a large group format for, say, 2 hours. How do we chunk them throughout the summer and start sending these out to our new hires so that they really have that orientation over the summer and they're ready to start on day one? Thinking too about the booster sessions for all staff. How do we make sure that people, if we haven't had the opportunity to be in a school setting together to do these things, how do we provide that refresher and get you ready to go? And so Ken talked earlier about training content. Here's an example. So on the left, this is just an example from that professional development blueprint I mentioned earlier. And in case you haven't seen, Tina linked it right into the chat. So thanks so much, Tina, for putting a link into the chat for the professional development blueprint. It does a nice job. And if you look at the left-hand side of outlining what might be the training content at a specific tier, what might be the materials or tools that are needed, as well as the hopeful outcomes that we get from this training. Our team here has also created a table thinking through knowledge and skills. What might we want to cover? Those are those rows, but then looking left to right in the columns, what's important for new staff? What's important for returning staff? Substitutes, we often overlook making sure that our substitute teachers or our guest teachers are ready and set up for success. What's the training we need for PBS coaches or just people that are at the district level? Oftentimes we forget that people that work across the district and maybe aren't actually in a classroom providing instruction, they still need professional development on PBS as well. So thinking through all those different roles and what their responsibilities are, and you can see where the X's are in those cells, can really help a team start to identify what do we need to plan for, what do we need to organize in terms of our content. So we've got the content, we're training people. We also want to establish some communities of practice, much like what we're doing here today, or what the intention with this is for all of you that are doing this work in Pennsylvania to do PBS at the district level. It's always helpful to have these networking opportunities to get and receive ideas. We want to try to infuse those into that teacher level or that personnel level within our district as well, giving people the opportunity to talk with others about social emotional work and how they're working with behavior systems. So the main idea here is that it just helps us expand our skill set. It helps get us new ideas and share ideas. And it's going to promote fidelity of implementation, because oftentimes somebody says something, it's the same thing you've always heard, but just said in a new and different way, and it rings different. And so that's the goal by creating a community of practice. In Missouri, there's a lot of our districts that do professional learning communities, PLCs. And so we have our teams that meet as PLCs often. This question is trying to get people to think about, okay, could I have a PLC that is across our district? Maybe not just within my own building, but I got the opportunity to talk to other fourth grade teachers or other biology teachers at other high schools in the district, or even working with your state technical assistance provider like TITA and others on the call today to identify opportunities to talk across districts, much like what we're doing together. And so we give you some quick checks thinking through, and especially for the district leadership team that you're organizing, what's their role? How can they help to facilitate this cross-district communication so that way your teachers, your personnel are getting new ideas, new resources that can move the work forward? I think it's super cool that Tina created this environment, because as you all move forward, it's great for your teachers to be able to talk to each other from one district to the next, because the common element is that your districts are doing district-wide PBIS. Yeah, the location's different and your communities are different, but there are some things that we can still learn from each other. The last item we'll talk about today is internal professional development. So how do we work to establish a core group of individuals within the district so that way we can regularly provide opportunities to learn and grow and enhance our skills? And it's ultimately going to be much more sustainable that way versus paying for somebody to come into the district and kind of do these one-off events. How do we create something that's more organic to our district, much more sustainable? And the benefit of doing that, and you see it on the screen, it's going to increase the relevance. When we have our own people that are knowledgeable about this work and facilitating these training events, they're much more able to draw those natural connections and help people identify why this is relevant to our current context. It's going to increase that contextual fit. And then because they are in the district and are able to see all the things that are happening, it's going to work to enhance that level of alignment from one program or initiative to another. And so thinking through in your district, what PBIS training can district and faculty staff access? Is it done within the district? Have you moved from individuals outside coming in to actually inside individuals. And so it's helpful to think about how that internal coaching support benefits people. And so this is an actual graphic from that implementation or that PD blueprint I mentioned earlier. Thinking through, you've got your district PBIS team. Their role is to ultimately support school teams. And the mechanism to help them support school teams is that internal coaching support. And it's the school teams that provide support to the school staff, and it's the school staff that benefit the students through the team support. So by having this system where we're supporting each other with our own people, it's going to create a much more relevant system and a much more sustainable system. One of the things, I think I mentioned this in our first session together back in December, the trainer coach self-assessment. That's another valuable tool here in this strand on training. And so I've given you a link here. There's a trainer coach self-assessment that's at the end of the professional development blueprint. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen the questions. What our team did was make this electronic, where a district leadership team could send this link out to their trainers, to their coaches, or people that were, say, applying to become a trainer or a coach. And it would give them a really structured way of assessing, where are we strong? Do we have a lot of knowledge at tier 1? And if so, in what items? Do we have a lot of knowledge at tier 3? And if so, in what items? And so this tool here, it'll generate charts and graphs that a district leadership team or a PBIS coordinator could use to make sure that you really have a deep bench, so to speak, that can help facilitate all of the training needs and professional development plans within your district. So that's a link that we'll have for you and a resource that's available for you. And so before we close out today, let's check in on just those few items related to actually providing the professional development and the training. And so talk to us for a little bit. What steps has your district taken to arrange for and provide the PD, whether it be your orientations, your refreshers, your networking, or just what you've done to build that internal capacity? Lisa, do you want to talk real briefly about what maybe one of your districts has done related to these?
Building internal capacity, the first step is really finding people with expertise and passion and time. And then putting those folks together and providing technical assistance. And if you can start in that small area, then you can start to build internal capacity over time. Just one thing I've learned watching.
Others on our meeting today, thinking even just about refreshers and orientations for new staff next year. Have those conversations started? Okay, that's a good one to think about. We're going to check in with you when we come back in April. In the
Kelsey,
interest, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
real quick, something to think about that we've learned, that we've heard from school teams, is that when you have a standardized refresher or orientation PowerPoint video, little talk from your superintendent, it helps the school teams so they don't have to create it on their own. They can individualize it and contextualize it for their school. But if we have a framework sort of built out, they're super appreciative of it. So that's just one thing to think about this time of year.
Thanks for bringing that up, because it is a great thing that a district leadership team could work on over the spring, is getting whatever that shell is. So that way, we oftentimes talk about what are we tight on, what are we loose on. We're tight on the fact that we're all going to do a PBIS orientation and refresher at the building level, and it's going to cover these things. And then it gives the buildings the opportunity to go, okay, what are our expectations? These are our expectations. What are our routines? These are our routines. So it's got the things that we're all going to do that are common, plus some new things. Kira just put through the chat, here in Philly, we have a kickoff slide deck to use as a refresher. That's a great idea. And thanks for putting that through the chat. Looking at resources, there's going to be a lot of things coming your way via Tina. We'll send you sample job description statements, as well as we have 2 sample job descriptions from start to finish from 2 districts that have been doing district-wide PBIS for several years. You can see just from the descriptive statements to an actual full job description, how does this evolve and work? We'll send you sample interview questions that could be used, as well as, I know Tina put it through the chat, and we'll make sure that you have it with the resources as well, the PD blueprint, and then the link to the trainer coach assessment. So that way you could use that as an ongoing resource and ongoing tool. Up next, we'll come back together on Tuesday, April the 20th, 1 to 2:30, our standard time. We're going to look specifically at strand 7, which is coaching. I mentioned earlier when I showed you that diagram that training is an event, coaching connects the boxes. And we're going to look specifically at coaching and how coaching really does connect one item to another in terms of that diagram and what happens day to day with coaches. Thinking about what you might do with your district between now and then, continue to reflect on workforce capacity and training. You might locate some of the information that you have in your district related to hiring criteria. What are we looking for? If there are current vacancies, what have we said we're looking for, and how does that connect or disconnect to our mission and vision for PBIS work? Identify where knowledge, skill, and experience implementing PBIS is included in, say, the current job descriptions that are out there, or even just existing job descriptions. Maybe it's not a vacancy. Maybe do a deep dive into just general job descriptions in your district. Where do you find PBIS implementation embedded? And then examine your district's PD plan. If you don't have a PD plan, start to brainstorm what might be the things that we want to include and how might we go about creating a PD plan. If you do have a PD plan, take a look at it. Do you see social, emotional, behavioral work? Do you see PBIS supported? Are you training and doing anything on PBIS? And then if you kind of think about the advanced move would be, can you find the natural connections and linkages between PBIS and other initiatives? So kind of the base move is get a plan. The advanced move is find that level of alignment between the work that we're doing and other things that are happening within the district. And then that brings us to a close today. And so we're happy to stick around, answer any final questions, clarify anything, and provide some additional answers. And then I always like to check in with Tina and just make sure there's anything that y'all need to know related to the Pennsylvania perspective.
I just want to say from a Pennsylvania standpoint, I have all but 2 of the sites have completed the Google form that I need all that information. And I've resent the request. I need the information in order to set up the contracts for the stipends. And you will be getting your stipend after we've completed the required components of this. The other thing that I wanted to say is that Kelsey and I and Lisa will be powwowing a little bit conversation around the idea of what we would like the target sites to share with us next time, so we can get a little bit of feedback on where things stand. Because I don't want the last session to hit and then all of a sudden, this is a lot of information that you're getting, and we're trying to piecemeal it, but we really do want you to see the power of this district implementation process and how, when you do this, you really will install this over the long term. So Kelsey and Lisa and I, along with Kelly, there's Kelly, will be looking at like what we're going to be asking all of you to do. I know that the network facilitators have been meeting with you on a regular basis to follow up with the homework for each time, and I truly appreciate that. Lisa Anderson, thank you for the prompt when you reminded me to send everything out again. And if there's anything, the record's off, just hang out here and ask questions, and I can stay longer than Kelsey if Kelsey needs to go. And there's also an evaluation in the chat box. Please complete that for the National Center, right, Kelly?
Yes, thank you. Great job today, everyone.
Yeah. So you guys can all start to leave as you want to. But if you want to talk, bye, Tim. Thanks for all your sharing.
Tina, you're still recording.
I am.
Everybody.
Oh, did I say something bad?
No,
You
you
just said you
didn't. It
weren't.
was all